SNIA is working on a standard for cloud storage that is an international standard since 2012 called the Cloud Data Management Interface. CDMI is a standard that is organically grown, and what I mean by that is that if somebody has a new idea for cloud standard, they can come to SNIA and add it as an extension to one of the existing versions of CDMI. We will publish that extension as a sort of mini standard, and if that mini standard gets adoption by 2 or more vendors, it makes its way into the formal CDMI standard. So we want to make sure that there are implementations before we standardize. That makes it more of an interoperable standard, more of a tighter standard when at least 2 vendors have implemented that part of it. Well, over time, that's how CDMI grows, is by having more and more extensions. We have published about 20 different extensions to CDMI on the SNIA website. People can go and find those extensions, and they probably will address some of the use cases they're interested in. Then they can either ask their vendors to implement the extension or they can implement it themselves. The OpenStack project has several different storage-related projects. First of all, there's Swift, which is an object storage interface, and CDMI can work side by side with the Swift interface as well as the S3 interface and enhance those access methods with a way to manage your data once it does get in the cloud, adding things like replication, retention, regulatory compliance, and so forth. So a use case for cloud storage is both the public cloud storage as well as private cloud storage. Large enterprises, Wall Street banks, for example, are setting up their own internal private clouds, and they would like to have interoperability between multiple vendors of their suppliers, both when they put their data in the private cloud as well as when they put their data in the public cloud. CDMI offers an industry standard for that. There's also the de facto standard of S3, as well as the open source standard of Swift. The adoption of standards has been slow. A lot of people are using public cloud standards, de facto standards such as Amazon's S3. We've seen most adoption of CDMI in the private cloud arena with vendor products that want to be interoperable with each other. The cloud vendors in the public space have been more interested in having their own standard that they have control over. But of course, this does lock the customers into that particular interface. A lot of people that claim to have S3 compliance have some form of S3 compliance. It may be a minimal set. Certainly, there is no standard from Amazon for managing your data, for example. So the public cloud is perfectly fine for a lot of folks, especially if they're not building their own data centers. But there are a significant number of companies that are still building data centers, that are still populating them with perhaps their own storage systems that they build from commodity components. And CDMI is definitely a candidate for those folks because they are building their own private cloud. They do want to have interoperability. Now, obviously, they are going to have an S3 interface, but the importance of managing their data in their own data center is key. And so it's not just an interface, it's not just an HTTP put and get of the data into the cloud that matters, but it's how they can manage that data over time. As the life cycle changes, as the requirements changes, as new regulations come into effect that they have to comply with. So that's our emphasis in the CDMI standard, is not just getting your data in and out of the cloud, but managing it while it's in the cloud, whether it's private, hybrid, or public.